Is the pendulum swinging the other way in Turkey? Back in June, Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan cracked down hard and violently, branding protesters fringe terrorists. After a decade in power, critics rued what they see as the AK party leader's increasingly authoritarian bend. Well, on Monday, Erdogan unveiled big reforms, billed as a major nod to Turkey's diversity. Changes to the electoral system, allowing civil servants to wear the Muslim headscarf, an increase in language rights, reforms that come just as a breakthrough talks with the Kurdish rebels and their imprisoned leader seem to be running out of gas. Will Erdogan silence critics and pave the way for reconciliation? Do his reforms go far enough? We're also going to take the long view on an emerging power that straddles Europe and Asia, one that's changed so much since the Islamist-rooted AKP came to power back in 2002. Today in the France 24 debate, meet the new Erdogan. And with us to talk about it, he's penned an editorial this Wednesday hailing the reforms as a step towards national reconciliation. EMRE DEMIR, editor of the French language version of Turkish daily Zaman, the French language version which available both in print and online. And online. Thanks for being with us. We are also pleased to welcome from Istanbul historian Vehbi BAYSAN, who teaches at Yeditepe University. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate. And we welcome back Gianni of Brazilian weekly magazine CARTA Capital, who covered the events back in June in Istanbul. We'll be getting your views in a moment. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Now, a wide range of reforms. They were long awaited. Before we go to our panel, let's get the breakdown with Kate Moody and William Hildebrandt filing this report.
A raft of long-awaited reforms for Turkey. Though the population is 99% Muslim, modern Turkey was founded on principles of secularism. And while many women wear Islamic headscarves in public, they'd been banned from donning them in state institutions. On Monday, accompanied by his wife in her own head covering, Prime Minister Erdogan lifted that restriction.
We are lifting the ban that bars women from wearing the headscarf. This is a violation and discriminates against the freedom of religion.
Many Turks welcomed the move, though some feared it would move the country away from its secular values.
We are living in a civilized society. Everybody should be free to do what they want.
This is a bad decision. It's tearing apart the foundations of the modern Turkish Republic.
Erdogan also made key concessions to Turkey's Kurds, which make up about a fifth of the population. In his speech, which was dubbed the democratization package, he said he would lower the 10% threshold needed for political parties to get into parliament, making it easier for Kurds to be represented. Analysts say Erdogan's biggest concern is jump-starting the Kurdish peace process. The militant Kurdish Workers' Party agreed to a ceasefire earlier this year and gradually began withdrawing fighters. In return, they demanded greater rights and representation. Erdogan is trying to rebuild his public image after widespread criticism of his crackdown on anti-government protests this summer.
Let's begin in Istanbul. Vehbi BAYSAN, how far have these reforms gone?
Well, in my view, they went quite well. It was a good positive step, which long waited. And when you look at the titles or the headlines of this democratization package, you will see, for example, today the national newspapers were very much focusing on the lifting the ban on headscarves, but in fact was effectively already kind of null and void, because you would see them in public places as well as government offices. So where I see actually it shows a good clear sign on the, especially since this program may be focusing on the Kurdish issue, all positive steps towards reconciliation and towards actually a viable strategy of sorting out this problem, which actually in Turkey cost over 40,000 lives, as well as actually damaged the Turkish economy. But this is not limited to only minorities as Kurds, but as we will discuss later, it's also allowing minorities to be able to teach in their own native language, and as well as the election actually brought up very new positive items in.
All right, we'll talk about that electoral reform in a moment. Gianni, CARTA, let me ask you, because here in France, as you know, we've had moves to tighten restrictions on the headscarf in the name of the separation of church and state. In Turkey, and we heard in that report, women making the point quite forcefully that, in fact, the ban on the headscarf is discriminatory. When you're in Istanbul, how do you see this problem when you're sitting in Istanbul?
Well, I think, first of all, that this is a president who's trying to clean a tarnished image, and he's trying to please both sides, both the moderate Muslims and the secularists and the more radical Muslims. And I think with a headscarf, he wants to please not the secularists. He wants to please, as a French person would think, as a European person would think, he wants to please the people who really vote for him, the majority of the people who vote for him, who are a bit more radical Muslims. So I don't see this as a great move.
That divide between Islamists and secularists in Turkey is a bitter one. How much will this measure sort of stoke that bitterness?
I think it will take some people back to the streets. I think some people are already, well, as Vehbi BAYSAN, Mr. Vehbi BAYSAN mentioned, some newspapers are complaining, even if this is the country where most journalists are in jail in Europe, but they're complaining about this. The people that I met who were in the protests were very upset with some laws, like the ban on alcohol from 10 p.m. till 6 a.m., the ban on the abortion pill. So I think this will, they know now that they have the power to demonstrate, and I think this will be a reason to start demonstrating again. Or I don't know to what extent. I'm sure it's not going to be like it was in the summer, but I'm sure that they're going to be showing that they're not in favor of this.
EMRE, DEMIR, what do you answer to people here in France? We've already heard people saying this isn't democratization, this is Islamization.
Well, to put it simple, no, not at all. This reform about the headscarf has nothing to do with Islamization of Turkey or whatever. But to give you an example, 63% of the Turkish women wear headscarves in Turkey, and they are, of course, they are not all Islamists or radicals, but they are just simply the Muslims with a certain religious sensibility. So, can you imagine a country like Turkey that 20 million of women cannot work in the public service just because they wear headscarves, regardless of their professional competence? So, there was also a public support about this issue. According to a very recent survey, last month, there was a recent survey who showed us that more than 60% of the Turkish population, the entire Turkish population, supports the removal of these restrictions about the Islamic headscarves in public service, including some of the electoral base of the pro-secular Kemalist party, CHP. So I don't think this all...
Turkey's moved beyond this.
Yeah, I think so. So it's not about Islamization, but it's about giving a fundamental right to the woman.
All right, let me bring up the issue that was brought up by Vehbi BAYSAN, the one about the electoral reform, lowering in Parliament the threshold, a Germany-style threshold. Yeah. Currently, it is 10%, and there's talk of lowering it to 5%. Of course, the Prime Minister, in his phrasing, was a little bit cagey. He didn't say he was going to do it. He said he's considering it. Is that going to happen, and will it mean that there will be more representation for smaller parties?
Yeah, precisely. Erdogan proposed three options leave it the same way, the election result, or
here, for instance, we got here on the screen. We have the results from the last election.
Mm-hmm.
You saw there. Would it change the makeup in Parliament if you had?
Of course, we don't talk about the too much, but I think it's the most important reform in this package. There will have this reform will have direct political results in the elections next year. So
how will it be different?
The small parties will have a much more strong presence in the parliament. So it will change the political arena of Turkey. It will change the political demands So we will see much more powerful Kurdish presence in the parliament. We will see much more important presence of the non-Muslim population. So for me, it's the most important and the most radical change in this package.
All right, we're pleased to welcome Kendal NEZAN. Paris traffic could not keep him away, president of the Kurdish Institute. Thanks for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Vehbi BAYSAN, your thoughts. Will the makeup of the next parliament be different if you lower that threshold to 5% like they have it in Germany?
Well, I'm sure it would do, because Turkish parliament, I think, for long need greater representation of minorities, not only in race or religion related, but also ideologically. And I would like to see maybe more environmentalists if Turkish parties can organize themselves like that, because currently the parties, in my view, quite archaic, and especially when you look at the opposition, I mean, I'm not on anybody's side, but there's a lot of criticism over them that whether or not they would deliver anything for the future of Turkey. So my wish and hope is to see greater representation, as I said, only ideological, environmental, Greens, you name it. So I think it's a good development if it can be achieved. Also, don't forget these things are just proposals by the Prime Minister, and they're saying that these things should be discussed publicly and debated, and if necessary, some more things, which in my view, many more things should be added. But as I said, I'm in a view also that these things are actually necessary, but for long. For example, teaching in their own language for many, I mean, it's taken granted for Kurds, but don't forget we have French schools and English language, German language schools in Turkey. So I'm in favor of greater representation and variety in Turkish parliament. It will bring flavor. I mean, it will be good.
Do you agree with that? That there will be greater. We'll see a broader spectrum of Turkey's political class represented in parliament as a result of this reform?
For the time being, there is a proposal. We don't know if the threshold will be 5%, 3%, 10%. But if it is 10%, of course, it doesn't give the opportunity for ideological or ethnic or other minorities to be fairly represented in the parliament. So it is a law which was imposed by the military coup d'etat in 1980, and so far it has been in action in Turkey. So it shows that we have a long way to go.
All right, Kendal NEZAN, I'm going to want your reaction to images we're about to show you. Back in March, the Kurdish separatist PKK agreed to a ceasefire and to talks. Those talks, well, they've stalled somewhat. And on Monday, tens of thousands turned out in the southeastern city of Diyarbakir to demand the release of the imprisoned Kurdish separatist leader Abdullah Öcalan and to criticize the reform. Should those reforms be rejected out of hand, or would you say they're a positive step? You heard there Vehbi BAYSAN hailing the fact that there is going to be minority languages that can be taught, a lifting on the ban on letters of the alphabet, Q, W, and X, not to name them. Positive steps?
I think there are a few positive steps in the right direction, but these are very, very modest and cosmetic steps. Because according to the European Union estimates, there are between 15 to 18 million Kurds in Turkey. See, it's almost a quarter of the population. So we are in a country which for 200,000 Turks of Cyprus asked confederal status, not less than confederation. At the same time, for their so-called Kurdish brothers, they just proposed education in private schools. Until 1991, the Kurds were paying to speak their language because they were fined for when they were using their language. Now they will have to pay to learn their language in the schools.
So what you're saying is that this should be extended to public schools?
It's one of the basic claims, demands of the Kurds are the education in the mother tongue. For 15, 18 million people, it's a very basic, minimal claim. The second one is a general political amnesty for everyone to end this period of violence, internal strife, wars, because it has been there for the whole life of the Turkish Republic. We are at war since 1924, where the Kurdish language was banned, the schools were banned, everything was banned. Before that, there was a public education in the Kurdish madrasas, and including Erdogan's, someone who is very much admired by Erdogan, Zaman Saidi Nursi, he was the ideologist of the modern Islam, and he was educated in the Kurdish madrasa school. So all this was ended in 1925. We have been at war.
All right, but now you're no longer at war. There's a ceasefire that's on.
Yes.
Will these reforms be enough to bring everybody back to the table?
No, of course not. The Kurdish demands are not met. The basic demand is education in Kurdish language. The second one is a general political amnesty. The third one is some degree of local autonomy. And I have to remind that during the Ottoman time, for 3 centuries, there was a very large self-rule for the Kurds. So Mr. Erdogan may be a little bit in advance in the Turkish political class, but he is much more behind of Suleiman the Magnificent, the Ottoman sultans. So he has to take a model on them, yeah.
All right, the demands that you're having. On Twitter, we've got one reaction. Erdogan turns back clock to pre-Ataturk times, allowing the veil while allowing Kurdish letters long overdue. No longer EU candidate. EMRE DEMIR, let me get your reaction to all this.
First of all, about the Kurdish education in Kurdish in the private schools, it's a good reform, but I think it's not sufficient when the demands of the Kurdish people about education in Kurdish in the public schools are met. Then Turkey will become a real democracy. But yet, it's a very important step, and we have to remember the recent history of Turkey. In 1991, the Kurdish language was officially banned, a banned language, and in 1993. Leyla Zana, a Kurdish deputy, was arrested just because she talked in Kurdish in the parliament. A Kurdish singer in 2000, Ahmet Kaya, a very popular singer, was forced to exile, forced to move to Paris in self-exile.
Right, so this is a big step. I'm going to have to interrupt you because we have to take a quick break. We're going to pick up on this.
Okay.
Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.